Thank you to my channel members and Ko-fi supporters that make these videos possible. You can also support me by buying a deck tech on my weekly Tuesday and Sunday streams. More info in the video description.
Hello everyone. Commander is a format that is really driven by player opinion instead of like a hard meta or anything. Like, yes, certain cards and archetypes do come to mind when you think of what a meta deck at any power level looks like. You might even run a hate card or something for that guy who runs a certain strategy that hoses your list. But overall, Commander is less about format knowledge due to its multiplayer nature and high variance deck building, making it so that the best deck at the table is never sure to win 100% of the time. That being said, there are still a lot of strategies that have the ability to frustrate the whole table every single time. And I have a theory that it's always because of one of three different things. Firstly, the father of all frustrating Commander games has to be wasting time. If a deck is unparalleled at munching up game time frequently and turns whatever game it touches into an unfun slog, it is also definitely high up on the salt production meter. Number 2 in my mind is a deck that frequently warps a game's purpose in a major way. It might not gobble up time, but instead it might end up making a game feel invalidated because of the way it interacts with the table. To be clear, I don't mean putting a big monster that is annoying, like Valgavoth or something, into play. That thing beats people to death and creates card advantage for you. By definition, any play does warp the fabric of the game. Some warp the game more than others, but generally speaking, when you are playing cards, it's to further the game state in your favor, which is an idea that some annoying decks tend to not subscribe to. Finally, I've also noticed frustration around decks that are playing a strategy that's harder to interact with. Think of Eminence Commanders, Yuriko, something like Kinnan or Urza, where they are sometimes mana positive to deploy, even after they've been cleared multiple times. While those aren't independent strategies or archetypes per se, they are cards that are on the annoying spectrum that display this disdain for things that are hard to interact with. Now, of course, this is all just based on opinion, but generally speaking, I think most Commander players would look at this list and agree that these are all annoying in their own unique way. I don't know, maybe you're a sicko that loves to run a deck that warps the game beyond belief, and that might be fun for a shakeup for some, if communicated properly beforehand, but generally speaking, that is the list of what I think all Commander grievance falls down to. I also need to mention that it's okay if your deck's a little annoying. Life isn't about blacks and whites here, there's plenty of gray to be explored. If you're rocking a list based on Lantern Control or Hate Bears, good luck removing all the annoyance factor from that deck. You won't be able to. But I've found that most groups are able to tank a little bit of annoyance because at the end of the day, people are only playing decks because they like them. So everyone gets a little headroom to be annoying at the Commander table before it becomes like an issue. It's all an innate sympathy that every player has. Oh, dude, that's rough. Your favorite archetype is a mill? Yeah, play Mindskinner, dude. We don't care as long as you're cool. That all being said, I went ahead and asked my Discord what their least favorite strategy to play against is in Commander to see if A, I even agree with them, B, if I could ascribe one or more of my 3 annoyance factors to it, and C, come up with a remedy for the archetype's bad vibes, or come up with some counterplay that can dampen the annoyance without being a big deck building cost. I ask my viewers to participate in videos like this a lot, so if you want to give your opinion in one of these videos, feel free to join my Discord, link in the video description below. Okay, let's go.
Our first response is from Leo Dragon, who says, least favorite, group hug. I play Magic to play against other people trying to win and find that group hug tends to kingmake one other player into winning the game. To me, I feel like group hug is kind of the king of warping the game's purpose in a major way. It's up there with chaos, kind of tied for first place there. What makes group hug so weird is that I think there's just like a vocabulary issue with the archetype. Because there are 100% players that play group hug, and they only do it because they want to accelerate the game and be like a support to like someone else and make them win. And they have no inclination to win the game on their own accord at all. There is a whole nother archetype of group hug decks that lean far more politically. I typically think of those as being the politics decks of the world, where you like use positive effects to shape opponent's decision making as opposed to like turbocharging one player or the entire table just because it's funny. There's definitely a line there, but people will use group hug to mean either or of those things when, generally speaking, those are two very different things. Like having a deck with a political angle where you're able to aid opponents for advantage, and willy-nilly, mindless, I have just accelerated this player into a win. Okay, let's go next and do it again, right? Those are two entirely separate things. And one of those is very frustrating, and the other one really is not. I do think group hug is one of those archetypes, and I mean true group hug, is one of those archetypes that can really throw a wrench into game night if it is not properly communicated or understood that that's what's going to be happening. There's certain decks that take advantage of group hug better. I think this is what makes it mainly frustrating more than any other kind of archetype here, is when you play like one of these like group hug cards that makes everyone explode. Certain decks are going to take better advantage of it than other decks. So if you're going in blind to this kind of game, you're kind of getting hosed by accident sometimes just because you're playing an aggro deck that wants to end the game early, and suddenly there's like 500 more cards and 500 more mana for every player. So the late game turbo greedy decks are actually the ones that are going to be winning out on that exchange, right? Oh, and don't get me started if you have a combo player in like at a table with the group hug deck. So now the question is, since I agree with you and I can ascribe one of the three factors to it, what's the remedy to group hug? Good communication's number one if you do want to play like true group hug. But a B tier alternative is like maybe build a politics deck if you want to play group hug consistently with a group and you don't want to annoy them and they find it annoying, right? You could have a play group that loves group hug, right? But like if you have a play group that doesn't want to play against that all the time, you could have an alternate build of your deck where it's a lot more political and aims to win with a certain combo or overrun kind of thing, whatever fits the archetype best. So you use the A side of the plan to politically get into the late game, and then in the late game you deploy this like big game-winning kill that like kills the last person you're with or whatever, right? I have been pondering a group hug deck or like a politics deck that gets down to a 1v1 and then you just like start like worst fearsing the last remaining opponent and just ruining their life. Like that would be probably a pretty good angle to take a group hug deck where like I would think it was pretty cool and not really all that annoying. Next up is Clueless, who says, really it depends on the agreed power level, but I can really dislike OTK, one turn kill, style combos. Feels like the win comes out of nowhere sometimes, and it makes anything I did that game feel useless if I don't have interaction up. So combo does get kind of a bad rap, despite being what I feel like one of the three main pillars of commander archetypes, right? Combo, aggro, control. And I feel like the frustration mostly lands in difficult to interact with as opposed to warping the game's purpose or wasting time. I feel like a strong reaction to combo decks is mostly a symptom of the hatred of stacks. There's this giant stigma against stacks in the format, and it's not entirely unearned, right? One of the main things we talked about was wasting time. Wasting time is a very big faux pas when it comes to most commander tables. And stacks does have the ability to waste time if the deck is built very poorly. But what I think people fail to realize is that stacks is a very healthy part of Magic the Gathering, and by taking it away, you are giving so much more credence to combo decks, which makes them feel unfair, right? You have instant speed interaction, right? Counter spells are a great answer to combo decks because they're instant speed interaction and they're able to even answer things before they even enter play. The only other thing that's able to do that are stacks pieces. By deploying a stacks piece early, you're able to basically interact with their combo without having to hold up instant speed stuff. You're preempting it with a stacks piece. And by losing this, a lot of colors like, let's say, black or red, sometimes even green, these sorts of like more creature-heavy decks, sorcery-heavy decks that aren't as interactive as Azorius are at instant speed, by demonizing a stacks piece, you have effectively removed these tools from these more sorcery speed colors to answer combos. Right, really quickly, let's analyze Thassa's Oracle really quick. Thassa's Oracle is counterspellable. You're able to use Endurance against it, right? Reshuffling graveyard into library, make their library larger than their Devotion to Blue so they don't win on the spot. There's a few answers to it in instant speed. But you could also answer it with a Torpor Orb, right? There's these stacks pieces that exist that make it very hard to win with a Thassa's Oracle, and that are still very good, powerful cards. Doorkeeper Thrall is another example. I guess that one is instant speed because it does have flash, but like Hushbringer, right? And there's also things like Mikakoro, Center of the Sea, right? This doesn't take up much deck real estate, especially in a low color deck. It could be one of your utility lands, and in fact, for certain decks like Zerzoth, it's a very powerful card. And then you can also use it against the Thassa's Oracle player, right? When they go for their combo and their deck's empty, you can activate Mikakoro, make them draw a card, and they lose instead of win the game. Anyway, stack pieces come in many different shapes and forms, and they're not always getting in the way of your strategy, and I would recommend those as a mitigation to combo decks. There is a lot of interaction to be had once you start digging for it. And there's some very broad stacks pieces that any color can run, like Disruptor Flute is an incredible example of one of these cards that's able to really stop a combo player in their tracks. And there's all sorts of cards that grab 2 mana value things, like Muddle the Mixture, or Delivery Moogle, or like there's all sorts of things that can grab Disruptor Flute. You can do Waterlogged Teachings, it has flash, right? Like you can have silver bullets and ways to grab them, and that gives your deck a lot of agency in these kinds of matchups where otherwise it wouldn't. Next up is Bonalisa, fucking awesome name. Cascade Slop. I hate Maelstrom Wanderer. It's an almost completely uninteractable value play that usually guarantees that the Maelstrom player gets immediate value for doing nothing and ramping for 4 turns. It also generates a stupid board state that requires answers. It feels like you have to deal with the Cascade player first, or else they overtake the board really quick. Now, yes, it is entirely true that Cascade hits on the grievance of being a little bit uninteractable, where like every spell is like multiple spells at once. I do think there is a certain like good argument to make for the wasting time aspect of Cascade decks, though. When you are resolving 3 spells every time you cast a spell, it gets a little bit time consumptive, right? You end up having like a bunch of spells on the stack and triggers you have to maintain, especially if you have a bunch from cast from exile triggers on the board, where your turn is basically always going to be like twice or 3 times longer than a normal turn, because all of your spells are 2 to 3 spells that then also come with a bunch of on-cast triggers from like your Flaming Tyrannosaurus and your Keeper of Secrets, right? So yes, Cascade is definitely a 2-pronged annoyance here. And also, I'm a little bit biased. Shout out my best friend Christian, who loves his Cascade cast from exile slop decks. There's nothing wrong with this strategy, and I'm downright here to say that like I think it is entirely fair to be playing it in like bracket 3. Then you can even do it in 2. Like you have the Warhammer precon. I would call that a very firm 2, the Chaos precon. And that's a Cascade precon. So there are ways to make this more doable. But generally speaking, due to the slower nature of the Commander format, with everyone being at 40 life, Cascade has the potential to breathe all of the air in the room, for certain. Now, my typical counterplay to Cascade is I just generally already run like Drannith Magistrate, right? This stops casting from exile. It also stops commanders, but you are able to run other hate cards for it. Cascade spells are free. So if you have room for a Vexing Bauble in your deck, which takes up very little real estate since it cycles, it's especially good for something like a Lurrus deck, which can repeatedly return it, right? If you're like an Aristocrats anything deck that can return these things, Zorlin, Cosmos Color, any of these like Sun Titan kind of effects, it's a decent card draw engine. But also, you can run things like Boromir, Warden of the Tower. This card's just insane. Other things that work too, Rule of Laws. There's plenty of things to counter a Cascade strategy that also splash damage a bunch of other strategies, which of course makes the card a lot more live in a lot more matchups. It's not just a silver bullet for your friend's Cascade deck. That Rule of Law also stops Storm players. It also stops a lot of combos. If you're able to build around it, like have a flash deck where you have a lot of instant speed plays, or you kind of just deploy one big thing every turn, then it's just icing on the cake.
Okay, thank you for everyone who sent in a reply. There was a lot of them. I think at the end, it's important to understand that your most annoying archetype is someone's favorite. We're all hopefully just here to have a good time. And I think clear conversation and goal setting before a game is the perfect way to quash most frustration when it comes to a format that is intensely unregulated as Commander. I mean, you could also just have like a regular play group where like everyone just knows what's up, but anyway, the rest just comes down to deck building. At the end of the day, you kind of pick what decks you're going to be weaker to when you build your deck. If you decide to leave the Graveyard Hate in the binder, for instance, and don't include any in your deck, you can't really blame the Marin player for stomping you into dust and particles. Truth be told, most decks are able to be answered pretty handily by a wide range of strategies. It just takes a little know-how to get to a state where you're able to include answers in your deck without feeling like you're watering down its identity. I personally find it super engaging to find what interaction and hate pieces I can fit into my lists, especially when they are a lot more restrictive than an average commander deck. You have a lot more power than you realize in deck building. Anyway, thank you for watching. What archetype do you hate the most? A deck that you know is hated but you love anyway? Let me know down in the comments below, and until next time, bye! That bye was really bad.